I was 3 feet away when Jake wired $70,000 to a closing table. That same afternoon, his brother Marcus signed another lease instead. I'm Henry. I've known both of them since college. And before we run a single number, I want to ask you something. If your rent was $653 a month cheaper than buying, would you actually invest that difference every single month for 20 years, including the months the market drops 40% and your whole account turns red? Your answer to that question is going to matter more than anything else in this video. Here's the problem with most rent versus buy content. The homeownership side shows you what a house is worth in 20 years and calls it proof. The renting side leads with flexibility and freedom and pretends that has no long-term cost. Neither side runs the full math. And almost no one, seriously, almost no one, looks honestly at what people actually do versus what the spreadsheet assumes they'll do. This video does both. The real numbers and the real behavior. Because the gap between what you plan to do and what you actually do, that's where the money gets decided. If that's the kind of honest breakdown you've been looking for, subscribe right now. This channel runs the real math on financial decisions. Not the version that sounds good on a thumbnail, the version that holds up. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. Now let me set the stage. Jake is the older brother. He's always been the one with a plan. Marcus watched the market through every dip since 2008 and never flinched. Both 32, both earning $80,000 a year, both with $70,000 saved, both renting in the same mid-sized city. A 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood lists at $350,000. Jake buys it. He puts the full $70,000 down, exactly 20%, which lets him skip private mortgage insurance. 30-year loan at 7%. His principal and interest payment comes to $1,863 a month. Property taxes, $350. Homeowners insurance, $150. Maintenance, $290. That's roughly 1% of the home's value annually, the minimum any honest financial planner will tell you to budget. Jake's total monthly cost, $2,653. Marcus calls his landlord and signs another year. He rents a comparable 3-bedroom in the same area for $2,000 a month, takes the $70,000 he didn't spend on a down payment and puts it into a total stock market index fund. And he invests the $653 monthly difference, the gap between what Jake pays and what he pays. On paper, Marcus just found a loophole, same neighborhood, same size home, $653 cheaper every single month, and all his capital still in the market. But hold on to this as we go through the numbers. Marcus has to actually do that every single month for 20 years. That assumption is doing more work in this comparison than any interest rate or appreciation figure. And it's the assumption almost nobody examines, honestly. The moment Jake signs at that closing table, he is not ahead. He's behind, and not by a little. Closing costs on a $350,000 home run between 2 and 5% of the purchase price. Lender fees, title insurance, attorney fees, prepaid taxes, escrow setup. Jake wired $70,000 to closing. His real day one cost is closer to $82,000 to $88,000. That gap, $12,000 to $18. $1,000 needs to be recovered before buying starts to make more financial sense than renting. The real estate industry doesn't advertise that number because it makes year one look bad, but it's real. It's standard, and it lands at the same table where everyone is smiling and shaking hands. Now here's the part that almost never makes it into the homeownership pitch. In year one of a 30-year mortgage at 7%, the vast majority of your payment is interest, not equity. Of that $1, $863 monthly payment, $1,630 goes to the bank as interest in month one. Only $230 actually reduces the loan balance. So Jake is paying $1,633 in interest, $350 in taxes, $150 in insurance, $290 in maintenance. That's $423 a month going out the door with no equity attached. The $230 in principal paydown is the only part doing what people imagine the whole payment is doing. Throwing money away on rent. It's the most repeated line in this debate. In year one, Jake is throwing away $2, $423 a month on costs that build no equity. Marcus is throwing away $2,000 on rent. Marcus is throwing away less. The phrase survived because it sounds right. The math says otherwise, but that is not the conclusion. That's year one. The story changes. The question is when and what actually decides where it ends up. Let's run the numbers through year 3. Jake has paid about $95,500 in total housing costs, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, maintenance combined. Of that, roughly $8, $300 has gone toward actual principal paydown. His remaining balance is around $271,700. The home has appreciated at 3 to 4% a year and is now worth between $383,000 and $396,000. His equity sits somewhere between $111,000 and $124,000. Real wealth. Locked in the walls of a house he can't sell without paying 5 to 6% in commissions on the way out. He replaced a water heater in year 2, $300. Dealt with a wall crack, a weekend, and $400 in materials. Handled it. More is coming. Marcus has paid $72,000 in rent. His $70,000 index fund has grown to about $93,000. Monthly contributions added another $27,000 in portfolio value. Total liquid wealth, around $120,000. He hasn't replaced a water heater. He called his landlord. At year 3, Marcus is slightly ahead on liquid net worth. Jake has more equity on paper, but he can't touch equity without selling the house or taking on new debt. Marcus can access his money any day the market's open. Here's what the numbers show. And here's what I actually watched. Around month 14, the market pulled back 12%. Not a crash, a correction. Marcus opened his investment app and looked at the balance. Down about $8,400 from its high, he still transferred money that month, but $400 instead of $653. There was a weekend trip with some friends he'd been planning, just this once. End of year 2, he got a work bonus. He thought about making up the shortfall from the summer, then he bought a new television instead. Marcus didn't fail. He didn't panic sell. He held through it and kept going. He was doing better than most people around him. But better than most and what the spreadsheet assumed are two very different numbers. That gap, small every single month, compounding quietly across years, is exactly where this story gets decided. Now let's talk about the costs that almost never show up in the buying analysis. When Jake eventually sells, he'll pay a seller's commission, typically 5 to 6% of the sale price. On a $500,000 home, that's $25,000 to $30,000 leaving his pocket right at the closing table. Combined with what he paid getting in, the total transaction drag across a full buy and sell cycle is often 8 to 10% of the home's value. That's the bar appreciation has to clear before the investment actually performs. Property taxes follow assessed value. Jake's $350 a month is based on a $350,000 home. When that home appreciates to $500,000, the taxes follow. His housing cost grows over time, even though the mortgage payment stays fixed. Marcus's rent goes up too, but his landlord absorbs the property tax exposure. Not Marcus, and maintenance is not optional. Budget years look like $200 in caulk and light bulbs. Real years look like a $9,000 HVAC system, then another $7,500 a few years later, then a $4,000 foundation repair. These aren't surprises, they're guarantees. A homeowner who doesn't set aside for them isn't saving money, they're just pushing the bill forward to a date that never gets announced. Then there's the number that almost never appears in homeownership calculations: opportunity cost. Jake's $70, Sousan left the market the day he wired it to closing. At 10% average annual returns over 20 years, that $70,000 would have grown to around $470,000 in an index fund. That's not money Jake lost. It's the outcome he traded away. The comparison only works if you count both sides of the ledger. If this breakdown is already showing you the parts of this debate that usually get left out, hit like right now. It takes 1 second and it helps this reach more people. Year 10. Let's see where they both are. Jake's home is worth roughly $483,000 to $500,000. Mortgage balance after 10 years, about $246,000. Equity, $237,000 to $254,000. He's spent $30,000 to $40,000 on maintenance, repairs, and small upgrades over the decade. Total money out of pocket, down payment, closing costs, everything above principal, somewhere between $160,000 and $185,000. Marcus has been investing since day one. His $70,000 has grown to about $181,000. Monthly contributions averaged around $580, because as his rent went up 3% a year, the gap between his costs and Jake's costs got narrower. Contribution-based growth adds about $110,000. Total liquid portfolio around $291,000. On liquid net worth, Marcus is still ahead. Jake's equity of roughly $245,000 trails Marcus's $291,000 in accessible assets. But something important has shifted. Marcus's rent has climbed to about $2,690 a month. He's now paying nearly as much as Jake every month, with nothing building underneath it. Jake's mortgage payment is still $1,863. It hasn't moved in 10 years. It won't move for 20 more. Then 2020 happened. The market dropped 34% in 33 days. Marcus watched his portfolio go from around $180,000 to $119,000 on the screen. Jake looked at his house, still standing, same street. Mortgage payment didn't change. Marcus didn't sell. He held through all of it, but that month he contributed $0 to the index fund. The month after, $200. He needed to feel steady before he could look at numbers again. That's not weakness. That's human. But the spreadsheet doesn't have a column for human. Jake didn't have a choice. The mortgage came out automatically. No decision to make. No red number on a screen. No moment where he had to override his own instincts and hit the transfer button anyway. It happened because it had to happen. Year 20. Jake's home is worth $670,000 to $700,000. Mortgage balance, $188,000. Equity, $482,000 to $512,000. And that $1,863 payment, the same number from day one, is still the number, while everything around him has gotten more expensive. Now here's the honest split this comparison almost never makes. The theoretical Marcus, the one who invested $653 every single month for 20 years without missing once, has a portfolio worth around $550,000 to $580,000. That version of Marcus is slightly ahead of Jake, but Vanguard's research on automatic versus voluntary retirement contributions has found something consistent across millions of participants. When people have to actively choose to invest each month, they contribute at significantly lower rates than when the money moves automatically. Same income, same intentions, same stated goals. The only variable is whether the decision gets made once or has to be made hundreds of times in a row through every market swing and every expensive month life throws at you. The real Marcus, the long weekend in year 1, the television in year 2, the 2 months of nothing after the 2020 crash, the smaller contributions every time rent went up and the budget got tight, is closer to $490,000 to $510,000. His rent has climbed to around $3,600 a month. The monthly gap that powered his early compounding is mostly gone. The engine that made rentings look so strong on paper is running out of fuel. Buying a home enforces savings automatically, every month, whether the market is up or down or in free fall. Whether you feel confident or scared, whether you checked your balance this morning or you haven't opened the app in 3 months, the payment goes through because it has to. That doesn't appear on any spreadsheet. And it's the main reason homeownership builds more actual wealth for actual people than the theory predicts. Not because the math favors buying, because the average person isn't the person in the spreadsheet. Year 30, Jake's mortgage is finished. The home is worth $850,000 to $950,000. His monthly housing cost drops to taxes, insurance, and maintenance around $900 to $3,100 a month. For the first time in 30 years, the largest fixed expense in his budget is gone. 360 payments made automatically through every market crash and recovery and life event in between, quietly compounding for 3 decades. Marcus at year 30 is still paying rent. It's climbed to $4,700 to $5,000 a month, no asset underneath it, no endpoint. No floor under his cost of living. His portfolio, if he genuinely stayed disciplined the entire way, is maybe $700,000 to $750,000 in theory. In practice, closer to $580,000 to $620,000. Marcus isn't broke. Marcus didn't lose. But at 62, he's writing a $5,000 rent check every month with nothing being built, while Jake is living in a paid-off home worth close to $1 million for $1,200 a month. Marcus played the math right. For most of the journey, he was actually winning, but the math he played assumed a version of himself that didn't quite exist. Now let me be honest about the buying side, because anyone skipping this part is selling you the rosy version. The break-even is longer than most buyers expect. Factor in closing costs going in, selling costs going out, and the interest-heavy early years, buying typically doesn't outperform renting and investing until year 5 to 7 in a normal market. Buy and sell in 3 years, and there's a real chance you came out behind. Concentration risk is real and underappreciated. Marcus is diversified across thousands of companies in dozens of sectors. Jake's entire net worth is 1 building, 1 street, 1 zip code. A homeowner in Detroit in 2006 or Las Vegas in 2008 knows what it feels like when your biggest asset drops 30% and you can't rebalance. And liquidity matters more than people realize until they actually need it. Jake can't sell 5% of his house to cover a medical emergency. He can't access his equity without taking on new debt at a new interest rate. Home equity is real wealth. It's just wealth you can't spend without selling or borrowing. These are real costs. Anyone leaving them out isn't running the full math. If this is more useful than the version that just tells you to buy or just tells you to rent, hit like right now and drop a comment. Are you Team Jake or Team Marcus? I read every single one. Here's the honest answer, and it's not the same for everyone. Buying wins clearly in specific situations. If you're staying at least 7 to 10 years, the transaction costs stop being a drag, and the fixed payment becomes a massive long-term advantage. If your local price-to-rent ratio, home price divided by annual rent for a comparable place, is below 20, buying tends to pencil out. If your rent is already close to what a full mortgage payment would cost, the case for renting gets weaker every year. And if you're honest with yourself about your own investment discipline, buying removes a decision that most people eventually get wrong. Renting wins clearly in other situations. If you might move in the next 3 to 5 years, transaction costs alone will likely leave you behind. If your price-to-rent ratio is above 25, renting and consistently investing the difference will often outperform buying even over long horizons. If you're in a career phase where staying mobile actually grows your income, the flexibility of renting has real economic value that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet. The questions that decide everything: how long are you actually staying? Not how long you think. How long you're actually staying. If you rent, will you actually invest the difference? Every month, through the drops, through the months when life is expensive and the transfer feels optional. And here's a third question. One this debate almost never asks. Do you know which version of yourself shows up at 2 in the morning when your portfolio is down $40,000 and the transfer button is right there? Not the version you plan to be. The version you actually are. Jake and Marcus are still brothers. Same table every Thanksgiving. And what I've learned watching both of them for 20 years is this. Both of them made the right call for who they actually were at 32. Not who they planned to be, who they were. The numbers told different stories, but they were both the right story for that person. The math, the comparison, the year 20 outcome, all of it flows from what you actually do, not what you plan to do, not what you'll tell yourself you'll do when the market drops, what you actually do. If this gave you a clearer picture of what this decision looks like, not just the equity side, not just the flexibility side, but the part about who you actually are when the numbers stop cooperating, hit like before you go. It genuinely helps this reach more people who need it. Subscribe for weekly videos, real math, full picture, no agenda. And that question I asked you at the very beginning, would you actually invest that $653 every single month? Including the months everything turns red? You know the answer now. The only question left is what you're going to do with it. I'll see you in the next one.